Okay, in this lesson, we're going to continue with our study of chromatic chords, and we're going to be learning about augmented sixth chords. This is going to be the first lecture on augmented sixth chords, just kind of dealing with the basics. Then next time we'll be dealing with some more advanced topics regarding augmented sixth chords. All right, so let's start off with some general things about augmented sixth chords, then we'll talk about spelling them. So augmented sixth chords, as named, are based on the interval of an augmented sixth. This interval is created between flat scale degree 6, by the way, flat scale degree 6 means the same thing as minor mode 6, located in the bass, and sharp scale degree 4, occurring in one of the upper voices. So if your key is C major, if your key is C major, flat scale degree 6, or C major or minor, flat scale degree 6 will be the note A flat. So C major, A flat is flat scale degree 6. That needs to be put in the bass. And then in some upper voice, there will be sharp scale degree 4. That will be F sharp. And then you have the augmented 6. So flat 6 or minor mode 6 and sharp scale degree 4. That's how we get the augmented sixth. Now notice again that flat 6 must be in the bass for this interval to occur. Now these scale degrees create strong voice leading into scale degree 5 with flat 6 and sharp 4 wedging outward to an octave on scale degree 5. So that's the sound we're looking for here. Very distinctive. Augmented sixth chords really stand out when you hear them. Now, given the motion to scale degree 5, augmented sixth chords usually occur as part of the predominant function, giving the strongest possible resolution into 5. In other words, you have these two half-step resolutions into scale degree 5. That's the strongest one possible. And yes, that means it's usually going to be part of predominant function, and we'll see that a little later. We'll come back to this point. Number 4, this is getting us into our next topic. There are 3 basic types of augmented sixth chord. Each fills in the augmented sixth interval in a unique way. And just by convention, these are labeled the Italian augmented sixth, the French augmented sixth, and the German augmented sixth, and you can abbreviate those, IT for Italian, FR for French, and GR for German. So let's now move on to how to go about spelling those 3 augmented sixth chords. As mentioned, all will contain flat 6 in the bass and sharp 4 in one of the upper voices. Doesn't have to be the soprano, but for the sake of these examples right here, I'm here in C major, I put flat 6, which again I need since it's a major key. Flat 6, A flat in the bass, and I put sharp 4 in the soprano, just to show you how they're spelled, but you could have put the F sharp in the tenor, you could put it in the alto, and so on. So therefore, once you know that, the rest of this is all about how you fill them in. So what's the difference between these different chords? Essentially, there's different kind of figures that also go along with this. That's a way I like to remember these, actually. So the Italian augmented sixth, you're going to just add scale degree 1. That's all you got to do. Basically, add a third above the bass. If you're in 4 voices, then you're going to double that note. In other words, you don't want to double the tendency tones, so you're going to double that note. So here we have flat 6, sharp 4, and the other note I have is C, or scale degree 1. And therefore, it's the third above the bass. The figure for this chord, by the way, would look like this. You'll see just a 6 and a slash through it to show the raised 6. It's basically like a first inversion triad version of the augmented sixth chord. This is the most basic one possible. Here's your augmented 6, and then you add the C, and you get the chord. Okay, I'm going to resolve it just so it doesn't sound too unstable. So Italian 6, just 3 notes. French 6th, you have adding scale degree 1, and then you also add scale degree 2. So scale degree 1 and scale degree 2, and that gives you the French. Okay. This creates a 4-3 chord. chord. That's another, some books call this the French Augmented 4-3 or Augmented 6-4-3. So this is what the figures will look like there. Again, I actually kind of like that method for spelling these. If I'm writing the French Augmented 6th, I start by getting the Augmented 6th interval, and then I know that above the bass there's going to be a 3rd and a 4th, and I'm done. It's actually a lot faster than finding the scale degrees. But you'll get the same answer no matter what. Now then finally the German right here, scale degree 1 and flat scale degree 3. And again, flat scale degree 3 is the same thing as the minor mode scale degree 3. So flat 6, sharp 4, 1, and flat 3. Now, and that gives you these kind of figures. It gives you like basically a 6-5 chord. In other words, if you look at the figures, these all sound very similar. It's just a little bit slight distinctions in the way you fill out the motion in between or the space in between. One thing I like to do for the German 6 that I find the easiest is that actually if you look above the bass, A flat, basically you spell a major triad. A flat, C, E flat. So that's another way to think about this. That will come in handy when we talk about some modulations as well. Now, important, I already mentioned this, but just make sure that you know, in minor keys, both flat 6 and flat 3 are diatonic pitches, so you do not need to add any accidentals. So don't flat notes that are already flatted. You'll end up with the wrong note. If I was to give you a C minor key signature here, 3 flats, I wouldn't have needed the A flats, and I wouldn't have needed to put the flat for the E because they'd already be flatted in the key signature. So don't make that common mistake. It's very important to know whether you're in a major or a minor key when writing these. Kind of like with the Neapolitan, it's easier to write them in a minor key because most of the notes are just in the key signature. Next up, resolving augmented 6 chords. I think you'll find this to be already kind of understood by what I already talked about. So to resolve augmented 6 chords, flat 6 resolves down to 5, and sharp 4 resolves up to 5. That's the basic resolution. Always do that first. Take care of your tendency tones, and you get this wedge outward when you're going to resolve them. Then the rest of this is easy. The remaining voices move to the nearest chord tone, or they may stay as common tones, depending on the chord. Some chords have common tones, some don't. Number 3, you usually won't need to worry about this because it'll depend on what you're given, but to avoid parallel fifths, the German augmented 6 chord usually resolves to the cadential 6-4. So if I did this and went straight to 5, even though it doesn't stand out too much, I actually did create parallel fifths. So what composers will do is they'll go to the cadential 6-4 instead. That avoids the parallel fifths, or it delays them so you don't notice them. So pretty simple as far as resolving them. Just take the flat 6 down, the sharp 4 up. Everything else is usually easy to do because it's just kind of common tones or moving by step. All right, let's try this next activity out here. I want you to fill in the remaining voices of each augmented 6 chord. I've given you the augmented 6th in each case. All right, so I've already notated the augmented 6th. Make sure that you recognize which voices I've given you. Here I've given you bass and soprano. Here bass and tenor. Here bass and alto. So fill them out so you get the correct type, and then I want you to correctly resolve them as indicated. All right, go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll take a look at my answers. Okay, here are my answers. So when you're checking these, make sure you definitely do what I have as far as the arrows go. There's some different voicing options you might have had for some of these, but I think what I've chosen is the best. You look right here, you could have done unison E's. That would also have been fine. Here you could have put a C in the tenor and an A in the soprano. But the main thing is look at how the voices resolve. Make sure that your augmented sixth resolves out with the arrows. And as you can see, it's pretty much straightforward with the rest of the voices. They just kind of go to the closest chord tone. Now you'll notice when I go from the German augmented sixth to the conventional 6/4, especially if you're in a minor key, what happens is you just hold those notes over and then they resolve down. So basically when you hear that, all you hear is the augmented sixth interval resolving out. All right, let's go ahead and listen to all three of these. I'll play my voicing. So D minor, the first one, and I have next one, E major is the key, and I have next one, A minor is the key, and I have and there we go. All right, so we've talked about spelling them and resolving them. Now let's work on the analysis part of this. Music that has augmented sixth chords, often very interesting. Whoops, sorry, I shouldn't show that. Let me get my other sheet up. Okay, let's talk about some musical uses of this. I've already mentioned here that most augmented sixth chords occur as part of the predominant region, often within a series of chords that gradually build intensity to the arrival of the dominant. So usually the augmented sixth chord is the very last one that happens before you get to the dominant, and there's some sort of linear pattern that kind of leads into this. This is where the interest kind of comes in. Number two, some augmented sixth chords play an embellishing role and therefore might be used to prolong the dominant. Now I'll hold off on showing how that works. We're going to find one of these in the examples below. But just keep in mind, we say the augmented sixth chords are predominant, but yes, they will resolve to the dominant, but in terms of your second level analysis, they're not always under the PD label. Sometimes they're kind of embellishments of the dominant. So what I want you to do for the next three examples is to give me two levels of Roman numeral analysis, so the basic Roman numerals and then the T, P, D, D, T pattern underneath it, so the two levels. And then we're going to talk about the process by which the composer leads into the augmented sixth chord. And we'll find some pretty interesting things right here. Let's go one by one. All right, let me first play this first one, this first example, and then you can pause the video. Okay, so that's that first one. Go ahead and pause your video and give me two levels of analysis. Okay, let's take a look at my answer. Lots of interesting stuff going on here. Notice my very long predominant label. Now, admittedly, the 4 chord at the very beginning, it's so early that we definitely don't think we're at a cadence point yet, but still, there's a process going on here, essentially, with some voice exchanges. So 4, we have a little passing 1, 6, 4. Notice the chromatic voice exchange there. A, G, F sharp, F, G, A. Then we've landed with sharp 4. This is the 5, the 7 diminished 6, the 5. We landed with sharp 4 in the soprano. And we've ended up with scale degree 6 in the bass, but just the natural scale degree 6. Then we lower that to A flat, and now we're on the French augmented sixth. So there's this kind of linear process here where it gets stronger and stronger and stronger 4 is a predominant, but then 7 diminished 6 of 5 is even stronger in the motion into 5. Then we make it even stronger by going French augmented 6th, and then we arrive at the dominant. So there's always this, a lot of times there's this process by which we get to scale degree 6 in the bass, some sort of interesting outer voice linear pattern. So this is kind of a small scale example of that. Now on to the next one. Now this next one's very interesting. All right, this example from Mozart's D minor string quartet. You're mostly going to be focusing on, I would, just for reference, do the first phrase too, but I'm mostly interested in the second phrase and maybe comparing the two phrases here. So same idea, 2 levels of harmonic analysis. Let me play a recording of this. Okay, pause the video. Now that you've had a chance, let's see what I have. I'm first showing you the first phrase, just for reference. One thing that's interesting about this phrase is the stepwise bass line, right? D, C, B flat, A, G. These kind of passing chords happening on the weak beats. You have a passing 1-4-2, you have a passing 1-6-4, then you get your predominant, dominant tonic, okay? Now the consequent phrase, here's where we get some augmented 6 chord, or given an augmented 6 chord. Here's a really nice pattern that's used in a lot of pieces. We still have the descending bass line, but now it's chromaticized. Instead of a 1-4-2, we get a 5-4-2 of 4. Instead of a 6, we get a major 4-6. So actually using the sharp scale degree 6. Then we keep moving down by half step to the B flat, and then we get our German augmented 6, and then finally we arrive on the dominant. And what happens against that descending bass is you get an ascending line here. F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So you get this wedge pattern. Let me see if I can play this here. So, oh, sorry, let me do it again. So notice how that happens. We get stronger and stronger, finding some way to get to scale degree 6. And notice how, again, the German 6, the augmented 6 chord, is part of the predominant. It's the very last chord we get before we arrive on the 5. It's where we get the ultimate amount of intensity before that chord. All right, now let's go on to our last example. I'll warn you, this one's the exception. See, let me, rather than play a recording, I want you to start at this measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Start at the 4th measure. No, the 5th measure. Start at the 5th measure. And do 2 levels of Roman numeral analysis. I'll play out the chords a little later to show you how it works. So go ahead and pause the video now. This is in the key of C minor. All right, here's what I have for this example. As you're going to notice, as we'll get into this, where I have the German augmented 6th, I'm actually analyzing it as an embellishment of the 5 chord, right? So if I track us through this, tonic prolongation, right? A little passing chord between 1 and 1-6. Then we get the predominant, 2 diminished 6. Then we arrive on the cadential 6/4. But this cadential 6/4 doesn't resolve to 5 until here. So in between here, if we got rid of these two chords, this would be a perfect cadential 6/4 to 5. But then we have these two chords in between, the German augmented 6 and 7 diminished 7 of 5. Now, how can I know that this is prolonging the dominant? Well, one is that we've already had the predominant. We've already arrived on the 5. But second, look at the bass. Sol, la, fi, sol. It's a double neighbor figure happening there. So this particular German augmented 6 chord is not a predominant chord because we've already had that there. It's an embellishment of the dominant. Let me play this for you. All right. So 1, 5, 4, 3, 1, 6. Now we get the predominant. All right, and then we're going to land on the 5, cadential 6/4. But instead of just going like this to 5, we go. Kind of neat the way the dominant is being prolonged by the augmented 6 chord, kind of in combination with the 7 diminished 7 of 5. All right, so in this lesson, we've learned just the basics of spelling, resolving, and also we've seen how the augmented 6 chord kind of functions in its typical guises. What we'll see in the next lecture, we'll deal more with modulation.